I just got finished at the sale barn. I ended up buying 6 animals today, and I've sold 5, and I don't know exactly how much I got for my 5, but the cattle market today was doing real good. I mean, people were paying for the calves today. People seem to be motivated to sell calves, and people seem to be motivated to buy calves. It might be because the weather is turning cooler, and we might be entering a fall calving season. But there were a lot of calves today. There were a lot of calves, and people were buying calves, and the market seems to be doing okay. So that's got me feeling pretty good about my animals getting some, bringing in some money today. And so I'm on my way home. I got I'm going to go straight here for 20 miles, and then I'll take a left, and then I'll go straight for another 39 miles, and then I'll be home. So today I wanted to talk about the idea of okay, so the way that the U.S. economy is set up. Oh, there's something in the middle of the road here. The way that the U.S. economy, oh yeah, someone lost a tire. But the way that the U.S. economy is set up is that people need to invest. If you don't invest, you're not going to be able to make money. And I would be willing to take a bet with everybody on that statement. Anybody, if you do not invest your money, you will not be able to make money. You will be having money problems forever. I would take a bet with everybody on that statement. There is almost zero chance that you're going to get a job that just pays you enough money to just walk off into the sunset. It's just almost not possible, because earned income, if you go and you get a job, you have to pay a lot of money in taxes on those earnings. But if you invest your money, you can do things like store your wealth into assets, and then appreciate the value of the asset, and then retain your earnings via a unrealized gain. And if you retain your earnings via an unrealized gain, you can trade your asset for cash whenever you're ready to do it, and then you can go and invest the money that you make, and then now you make a boatload of money. You have a whole bunch of valuable assets, and you also don't own any or you don't owe hardly any income tax at all. And I've talked about this in the past, but I'll bring it up again today. The idea of the income tax system, and that a lot of people don't understand, I think particularly poor people do not understand, is that in terms of what the tax system actually is, in terms of what is the tax system in reality is not designed to be a punishment for rich people. So I'm going to talk about this again today. The big idea of the tax system is that the tax system is in place to encourage reinvestment. A lot of people, I think, particularly if you're poor, like if you don't understand money and you're poor, you're going to look at rich people. I mean, there's a very real possibility that there is a very large segment of poor people who believe that it is unfair that rich people do not pay income tax. There's a lot of there's probably there is a portion of the population right now that is poor and also believes that it is unfair that rich people don't have to pay income tax. And I'm gonna talk about it in terms of the perspective of somebody who makes a lot of money. In terms of I don't make I'm not like a billionaire, but I do make a substantial amount of money. I would say that over the next 365 days, I'm going to make close to, in terms of just straight cash, probably close to about $325,000. And over the next 2 years, my net worth is more than likely I would be willing to bet that in less than 2 years, my net worth will be over $10 million, and I will have done it via farming. And from my perspective, the tax system does not exist to be a punishment for rich people. The tax system exists to punish rich people if they do not reinvest the earnings that they make. That's why the tax system is what it is. And if rich people don't pay income tax, that's actually a good thing. That means that they reinvested all of their money. And so, I wanted to talk about my business plan too. I was thinking about this, but I need to think about my business plan. And so I'm going to talk about forward thinking. All of this tying back in together today in terms of forward thinking. Where do I see my finances going? Thinking objectively correctly. Considering all of these different things. Where do I see myself going? What am I going to do? How am I going to get there? What do I need to accomplish? The time frame that I'm going to be doing all these things. All of these things, I want to talk about it right now. And so I've been talking about once I've paid off all of my cattle debt. Once I've paid off all of my cattle debt, I'm going to take a loan for the appraisal value of my cattle, right? I've been talking about doing this for a long time. Once I've paid off all of my cattle debt, I'm going to take a loan for the appraisal value of my cattle. But I'm going to change up my plan a little bit, and I'm going to talk about why I'm doing that. So instead of waiting until I've paid off all of my cattle debt, I'm actually going to go to the bank and take a loan ASAP. I'm going to take a loan for 50 grand because I anticipate that 50 grand is a reasonable estimate for what my cattle will for the equity value that I will have stored in my cattle within the next 6 months. 50 grand is a very reasonable estimate. I believe that within 6 months, within 6 months, if I liquidate all of my cattle, I would have a minimum of 50 grand left over. That is ultimately what I'm saying. And so I anticipate that in 6 months, I will have $50,000 worth of equity in my cattle. If I liquidated all of my cattle, I could just pull all of the money that I've been putting into my cattle back out, and I could just be sitting on cash, which I don't want to do, right? I've already talked about this. The whole idea of an investment is that they are tax deductible. And if you appreciate the value of an investment profitably, you are actually turning your cash into an unrealized gain. And when you have unrealized gains, the big idea is that when you have unrealized gains, you are now essentially being able to grow your wealth tax-free. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loan ASAP. I'm going to take this loan ASAP. I'm going to go and I'm going to take a loan for 50 grand ASAP. And I am going to start bringing in cattle utilizing that new credit line. And I'm going to pay off my old credit line with the new credit line. And then I am going to start okay, because here's the thing. Within 2 weeks, I will have paid off another about $5,000 or $6,000 worth of debt. I will have paid off another $5,000 or $6,000 worth of debt, and that puts me at 52. And so by the end of next month or so, within 2 months, I will be in a situation where I have 40 cattle and I have $40,000 worth of debt. And if I have 40 cattle and $40,000 worth of debt, if I just appreciate the value of the animals that I have, I can actually pay back all of my debt and still have money left over. And within 3 months, I will be on my new field. And so all of this has got to tie together. All of this is going to tie together. And so the big idea is that so in 3 months, it will be the beginning of December. And by the end of December, I will essentially have funded my new property and gotten everything squared away. And, things are on track. Things are on track to get done. And I'm doing well right now. I don't want to give myself bad luck, but things are going well right now. And so I am, the big idea is that I am going to take the loan ASAP. And the reason that I want to take the loan ASAP is because when I take the loan and I pay off my other loan, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm sitting on my hands for 2 months. And I was thinking about this yesterday evening, and I was thinking about this morning. But if I had not done what I had done about 3 months ago, if I did not do what I did, if I was still sitting on my hands in my living room just collecting money, I would be sitting on like $25,000 right now. I would be sitting, within 2 weeks, I would be sitting on like $26,000. And, I was actually thinking about this last night and thinking about this morning, and the big idea of me choosing where I want to be, and choosing where I want to be on purpose, right? I've always said that, the big thing about me is that I chose to be here, right? That's one of the big things. And a good example of this, of what I mean by I chose to be here, was that if I did not do what I did when I did it, I would essentially just be sitting in a room right now with $25,000 cash. And I would not be happy. I mean, it might even be like $30,000 cash. I would just be sitting in a living room right now. I would have been sitting on my dining room table with $30,000 worth of cash. And I would not have been happy. I did that for like a month, and I was not happy doing that. I've always said, okay, and I've talked about this, but I've always said that if I wanted to, I could always come back, right? Like, let's just say that I decided that I did not want to farm 50 acres. I did not want to farm 200 acres. I just wanted to farm 10 acres for the rest of my life. If I wanted to sit on a 10-acre field and make $15,000, $20,000 a month for the rest of my life, I could always come back and do that. Like, even right now, I'm not at risk of losing like anything. Like, I could always come back. If I genuinely was like, farming like this is just not for me. I don't want to farm 50 acres. I don't want to farm 200 acres. I don't want to farm 250 acres. If I decided that, let's say I went out and I decided that, like, right now I'm buying a 50-acre piece of land, and let's just say I decided, farming is just not for me. It's just not for me. I don't want to do it. Well, I can always come back and just farm 10 acres. And if I farm 10 acres, I can make my $15,000, $20,000 a month. And I could essentially just have all of the money that I could ever use. I don't have to worry about anything. I could essentially just live my life being somebody who makes $15,000 to $20,000 a month. If that was really what I wanted to do. But I'm telling you right now, I did that for about a month, and I was becoming miserable very quickly. I was not happy. I was sitting there just collecting money, and I was not happy. I was not happy. I would rather be pushing forward and doing better for myself than sitting in a room just collecting money. I don't want to sit in a room and collect money. I was not happy doing that. And so, I chose to do this, and that's the big idea, is that I chose to do this. I chose to reinvest all of my money. I chose to be here, and so that's the big thing about me. I'm not sitting here going, oh my God, I chose to do something else, but then my life fell apart, right? I mean, I've already said that, like, if you plan to do something and it does not turn out well, it's probably a good idea to sit there and replan. I mean, think about what went wrong, how did it go wrong, and then really think about it, okay? Because things should not be going completely off center. If you're completely off center, something is wrong, right? I mean, something is wrong. That's another way to look at it. It shouldn't, things should not just be completely off center. Okay? To a reasonable degree, you should be somewhat correct. And a way to think about this is think about what I've been saying about my cattle. If I bring them home at an average weight of 200 pounds, I take the feeder cattle number, I cut the number in half, and then I take a 10% deduction. Then I go to the sale barn and I purchase number 1 to 1.5 type animals at 200 pounds on the average for that price. Right? That's all just objective information. You can go on the stock market right now, look up the feeder cattle price, take a 10% deduction off of it, and cut it in half. It's not hard, right? I mean, that's objective information. It's not, and if something went wrong with my calculation, then I could sit there and think about it, right? Oh, maybe I should not do a 10% deduction, right? Or maybe I should just or maybe I should do a 15% deduction, whatever it may be, right? Over the long term, from what I have seen, if the feeder cattle market is sitting at 235, the feeder cattle here in Texas are going to sell, like if you have a lot of number 1 type cattle, like true number 1 type Texas cattle, straight steers, 800 pounds, maybe they sell for like 225, maybe 230, something like that, right? And for 230 on a number 1 type animal at 800 pounds, that's essentially what is that? What's 800 times 2.3? That's like I don't know. What is that? Like $1,850, something like that, right? And so if I take that $1,850 number, I take a 10% deduction, then now I'm sitting on about $1,650. I cut that number in half, and now I'm sitting on about $825, right? And so I've been saying that if I bring them home at if I bring the animals home at like 150, if I bring them home at 150 pounds, I'll pay about $600 for them. And today I brought them home at 275, 280, and I paid $880 per animal. So over the long term, and if you think about it, then I'm more or less right on the I'm more or less thinking correctly, right? I mean, if I brought them home at 280 this week for $880, and last week I brought them home, or 2 weeks ago I brought them home at 250 for $775, and then 2 weeks before that I brought them home at 175 for $650. Then it's essentially $750, right? And so all of this stuff, it's just like think about it, and I'm not looking to sound like an arrogant prick. I'm just saying that this is how I do things, and I just I do make a lot of money. Okay, I make a lot of money, and from what I have seen, the big idea with money is that once you hit about $8,000 a month, you can essentially do anything that you want, as long as it is reasonable. If you bring home $8,000 a month, you can essentially do anything short of buying like a private jet or a yacht. Once you start bringing home $8,000 a month within reason, within a reasonable margin, you can essentially do anything that you want. If you want to, something very reasonable that you could do with $8,000 a month is live on half of it and invest the other half. That would be something that is very reasonable, right? That would be something that is very reasonable. And so, you could go and do something like that. And if you invested your money, the big idea is your investment will give you money back, right? I've talked about this. The big idea of investing is to trade your money for something that is equally as valuable as the money itself. And when you do that, your investment should, you should also be in a situation where it's like if you put $4,000 into something, it should give you $5,000 back, right? That's the big idea. If you put $4,000 into something and it gives you $5,000 back, then you made all of your money back and then some, right? That's the big idea. And if your investment, if you lowball yourself and you think about, well, what would happen if my investment just did not work out for me? Then you would, let's say, $5,000, and let's say you bought a fourplex for $4,000 a month, and it makes $5,000 a month, and 2 people leave, right? Then now you're making $2,500 a month. well, you're still only negative $1,500 a month, and you should probably get on top of that and figure out your problem and get the get the vacancies filled, right? I mean, do something and solve the problem, right? Get the problem solved. Don't just sit there and go, oh my God, right? And so, but that's the big idea for me right now, is that I'm going to take this loan ASAP. Because here's the thing, and I want to talk about the like the 1 year outlook. Why, where am I going? Where do I see myself going? What's going to happen? And as I do these things, how do I see these things falling into place? So realistically, what's going to happen is that within 3 months, within 4 months, technically, I guess 4 months, 3 months and 3 weeks, I will have financed my new property. And once I've financed my new property, I'm not just going to be dumping money into my new property like I am right now, right? I'm not just going to be dumping money into it. And so the big idea, dang, something just ran out into the road and I just completely nailed it. I don't know what it was, but it exploded. Oh man. Okay, but the big idea is that here within about 3 months, if all I have is my mortgage payment on the new property, then I don't need to, then I'm not going to be burning, $10,000 of cash every month. Once I've got my new property squared away, I'm not going to be burning $10,000 worth of cash every month. And so what's realistically going to happen once I've got my new property squared away and I've got my new animals on it, etc., what's going to end up happening is that I'm going to start reinvesting my earnings entirely into bringing home new animals. Okay, here's a way to think about it. I have $5,000 cash in my bank account right now. I have $5,000 cash right now, and I have not hardly done. I've used like $200. I'm telling there's nothing that I could possibly do with $5,000 short of like doing drugs. There is nothing that I could do with $5,000. $5,000 is essentially enough money in my bank account for me to feel completely okay with like everything. I'm not worried about my bills. I'm not worried about an emergency expense. I'm not worried about anything. $5,000 a month, $5,000 in my bank account is enough money for me to essentially just be completely at peace with my finances. Because let's say that like next week I legitimately needed $10,000, right? Like, oh my God, next week I actually need $10,000. Well, if I have $5,000 in my bank account right now, and I sell 5 cattle next week, there's my $10,000-$12,000. I could just take my cattle and liquidate them, and there's my $10,000. I don't need any more cash. I have $5,000 in my bank account. I'm not worried about the possibility of just not having money. Like, I'm not worried about it. Like, if I had an emergency expense, I could pay for it. If I needed whatever it may be, I could pay for it, right? And if I really needed more money next week, I could just liquidate cattle, right? And then I'm good to go. And so this is also what I mean by, at $5,000, it's essentially enough money for me to be completely just completely okay with everything. I'm not worried about anything financially. If I have an emergency, I can pay for it. If I have if something happens, I can pay for it. If I do actually need money next week, if I need more money for whatever reason, I need more money, I can just go and bring home more money. I'm not worried about it, right? It would be different if all I had was $5,000 and then I had nothing in terms of valuable assets. Like if I had $5,000 and then I had no cattle, then sure, I'd probably be worried. But if I got $5,000 and I have 40 cattle, I'm not really worried about it. And so, one other thing that I want to talk about today was that, the idea of understanding the money, taking a look at the money. You're going to have to learn how to take a look at the money, right? Consider the money. I always say consider the money, right? Consider the money, consider the money. You have to also, You always have to take a look at the money, right? I talk about this all the time. If you don't know how to look at the money, you're gonna do horribly. You will fail. I can almost guarantee it. I would be willing to bet with everybody, if you're sitting there going, my life is a la la land journey and I'm not worried about the money. I'm not saying you have to worry about the money. I'm saying you should look at your money. See how much money's in your account. See how much money that's whatever it is that you're doing. See how much did it cost you. How much did you bring home and how much did it cost you, right? I mean, you should be sitting there thinking about your money. You should look at it. I would highly suggest that you do so. If you don't know how to, if you don't consider money, you're not gonna make it in business. You have to learn how to consider the money. Because at the end of the day, if you make money, you made money. If you lost money, you lost money. It just is what it is. You either made money or you didn't, right? Either you lost money or you didn't. I mean, you have to learn how to consider the money. So think about money and think about it in many different aspects. If I sell 5 cattle and I bring home 7 cattle, then I essentially made a 40% return on my money. Right? Granted that I brought home roughly equivalent assets. Right? I sold number 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame animals, and I brought home number 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame animals. Right? I mean, if you sold 5 animals and you brought home 6 animals, like today I sold 5 and I brought home 6. I'm not entirely sure how much I made on them, but also today I brought them in a little bit heavier. I brought them in at an average weight of 270. And so, I brought them home a little bit heavier today. And so I sold 5, and these 6 animals, I could probably get them up to about 600 within 4 months. If they're at 270 right now, I can probably get them up to about 600 in 4 months. And so, they're also going to sell higher than the average weight target that I have. And so it doesn't, all in all, it just ends up working out. And so it almost always just balances itself back out. And so, right now I got, but there are a lot of ways to understand, to keep, to have to consider the money. There's a lot of ways to do it. One way to do it is you can look at your bank account, right? Another way you can do it is think of in terms of, okay, if I sold 5 animals and I brought home 6 animals, and I also probably brought home a few $100s as well. Maybe I brought home, $500 to $1,000. I'll probably end up bringing home about I just took care of the vet bills. The vet bill today was $160, and so maybe I bring home about $700, and so realistically, I could have bought one more animal. So, and I've talked about this, but my margin right now, in terms of my margin, I'm making about a 30-40% return on my money. I make about a 30 to 40% return. And I've talked about this. There are other ways to visualize. How do you visualize how much money you're making? How do you consider the money in different ways? And I talked about this, but I was like, okay, if I bring them home, let's say I just flat out hit my goals, right? I brought them home at 200 pounds, and I paid $750 per animal. Today I brought them home at 270, and I paid $870 per animal. But let's just say I just hit my goals right on the button. Let's just say I hit all my goals. I brought them home at 200, and I paid $750 per animal, right? Let's just say I just hit my goals right on the button. And if I did that, or if I brought them in at 150, and let's just talk about this right now, because I haven't even thought about this, and so let's just say I brought them home at 200. I brought home straight number 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame animals. I didn't buy any plainer calves. Now, I've always said that if I get a good deal on a plainer calf, I'll just buy the plainer calf, because you can make money on plainer calves. You can, you can. If you get a good deal on them, you can make money on plainer calves too. But let's just say I just hit all my goals right on the button. I brought home 200-pound calves, 200 to 225 pounds or so, and I paid $750 per calf, right? I paid $750 per calf, and if I invested $100 a month per animal, which is ridiculous. I mean, let's think about it this way. Well, okay, so if I brought home a 200-pound calf, and in 4 months, I had the animal at 550 pounds, and I got $1,200 for that animal, I would only be making $50 per animal, right? Because 750 plus 400 would be 1150. And so, and this is also something that I was talking about, that $100 a month per animal is ridiculous. If I think about growing grass for my animals, I invest about $15 a month per animal. And if feed costs are expensive, like if feed costs are cheap, like feed costs right now are very low. If I buy feed at a cheap price, it's still almost 2 to 3 times more expensive than me just growing the grass. And so right now, like with it being grass growing season, I will more than likely, on the average, I can almost guarantee that if the price of urea is somewhere between $500 and $550 a ton, it will cost me about $15 a month per calf to grow a grass buffet for my calves. But if I put them on a commodity feed, it will cost me $30 to $45 a month per calf, even when feed costs are low. So let's just take a realistic, let's just say $50 per animal, because even $50 per animal, well, I mean, let's just say 50, right? Because right now I have them on grass, and I also have them on commodity feed, right? And I'm not, they're not hardly eating much commodity. They're eating a good, maybe half of their diet in grass. So really, let's just say $50 per animal, right? Let's just say I put in $50 a month per animal. If I invest $50 per month per animal, that's $950. That I put $750 into buying the animal, and then I put $200 into raising the animal for the next 4 months. That's $950. And when I sell that calf, I make about $1,200. And that's what I mean by that's actually probably more accurate. In terms of a realistic scenario, that is more accurate. And that's what I mean by I make about a 30% return on my money. That would actually be more accurate. And when I start growing grass, I mean, it's the growing grass, even when feed costs are low, even when commodity grains are low, it still costs me like 3 times as much, 2 times as much, 2 to 3 times as much to feed my animals a commodity feed than it does for me to just grow the grass for them. And when I grow grass, my average number across the long haul with urea at $500 to $550 a ton is $15 a month per animal. If I put them on a commodity feed, it costs me about 30 to 45. So let's just say 37 and a half, right? And then let's just say $13.50 per animal for miscellaneous costs. And realistically, right now, my feed costs per month are probably closer to about $25 a month per animal because my animals are eating grass. And so that's actually more of a realistic look of how much money I make. And you can consider it that way too, right? I make $1,200 per animal, and I put about $900 to $950 into each animal. That's another way to look at it. So I make about $250 per animal, and that's about if I make $1,200 per animal, that's essentially about a third of that. About a third of that is profit, is the money that I keep, is net profit. And so that's another way to consider the money. There's a lot of ways to consider money because and I was talking about this, but if I invested $100 per animal and I have 400 animals, I have 40 animals. If I invested $100 per animal, that would be ridiculous. That would be $4,000 a month. That would be a shipping container full of corn. every single month. And I don't use a shipping container full of corn every single month. That would be, I paid $3.25 a ton for distiller grains. That means I would be using 10 tons, 12 tons of distiller grains. I don't use 12 tons. That would be like me feeding a 2,000 pound sack of distiller grains every day. I don't feed 2,000 pounds. I don't feed. That would be like me feeding a 2,000 pound sack of distiller grains every 3 days to 40 calves. To 40 calves that are average weight 450 pounds. I don't feed 2,000 pounds of distiller grains every 3 days. That's ridiculous. That's another way to consider the money. $4,000 would be like a shipping container full of corn every month. Every month. And another way to look at it would be like if I bought urea at $500 a ton, that would be like me buying 8 tons of urea every month. I don't buy 8 tons. Maybe I buy 1 ton a month, right? I mean, I don't buy 8 tons. That's ridiculous, right? And so that's another way to consider the money. But in a realistic, like when we take a look at my plan and how much money I am actually bringing home, right? When I take a look at the numbers for what they are, the most realistic way for me to put it is like, just take a look at the plan for what it is. If I bring home a 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame animal at about 200 pounds, I will pay about $750 for that animal. If I raise that animal for 4 months, I put him on a specific diet, etc., etc. I give him a certain amount of food. I feed him a certain type of diet. Over the next 4 months, they will get up to about 550 pounds. And a number 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame animal at 550 pounds will sell for about $1,200 on the average. Number 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame. If I consider the entire group of calves as a whole, some calves will sell for more, some calves will sell for less, but a $1,200 is a very reasonable estimate if the feeder cattle market is going sideways at $235. The feeder cattle market is sitting at $235 today. And so, and in this scenario where I buy calves for $750, realistically what's going to happen is that I'm going to put about $200 in per calf to raise the calf. And once I've raised the calf, I will be all in about $950, and I will make about $1,200 back. I make about a 30% return on my money, and that's another way to think about the money, right? Like, and when I talk about money and how money's just a number, which way you look at it, the numbers should add up. It does not matter. If you are in a situation where you're looking into getting a business, like let's say you've decided that you're going to buy a rental property, or you're going to go and buy yourself a business, whatever it may be. Let's say that you've decided to do it. If the numbers don't add up, something is wrong. Money is just a number going into the bank account and going out of the bank account. The numbers should add up. It does not matter however which way you look at it. If somebody tells you their expenses are $1,000 a month, but you take a look at it and you say that can't be true, right? That can't be true. I mean, something is wrong with that. Then something is wrong. Like if I said that I was going to, like let's say that for my business, I said that my expenses were $4,000 a month. That can't be true. That would be like me buying 8 tons of urea a month. That would be like me buying 13 tons of distiller grains a month. That would be like me buying a shipping container full of corn every month. That can't be true, right? Realistically, maybe when my expenses are high, I invest $1,500 a month, and when my expenses are low, it costs me about half of that, about $750 a month. That is more realistic, because what can I do with $750? I can buy a tonnage of fertilizer And I can also buy 1.5 tons of corn, right? If I have 1.5 tons of corn, that's 3,000. I can buy about 3,000 pounds of corn for about $250, right? And so if I buy 3,000 pounds of corn, and I have 40 calves, then I bought enough corn to feed each calf about 80 pounds of corn, about 3 pounds of corn a day, right? 2.5 pounds of corn a day. And if their average weight 400 pounds, I'm feeding them 0.5% of their body weight a day in corn, right? And so, the numbers always add up. They should add up to within a reasonable margin. They should be adding up. If they don't add up, it means something is wrong. So take a look at the numbers for what they are. And today, realistically, like today's a good example. I anticipate that I'm going to bring home probably another $500, $600, $700. I would say after my animals get sold, I'll probably bring home about another $500, $600, $700, something like that. And I sold 5 calves and I brought home 6. So essentially, I could have sold 5 calves and brought home 7. And if and I've been saying that I make about a 30 to 40% return on my money, right? And so, it costs money to feed the animals too. So, got to think about that. Like right now, I'm not considering my feed as an expense because I am making a positive return on my feed. My feed right now, I'm not considering an expense because every time I feed my animals, I make money on it. Right, feed costs are not way sky high right now. There are times when it's like you will actually lose money feeding an animal, right? Like if corn prices, let's say that there's a massive drought and everybody gets hit by a massive double whammy, corn prices will skyrocket and cattle prices will tank. And if that happens, corn is animal feed is now truly an expense because you're not able to make a positive return on that feed anymore because it's actually making you lose money by feeding the animal. But right now my feed costs, grain prices are so low in comparison to the cattle price that you could just feed animals with a commodity grain mixture and you will essentially just make money. I think that paradigm is going to shift when corn hits. If corn ever goes to $4.80 and cattle ever fall to about $2, $2.10, if feeder cattle fall to about $2 to $2.10 and corn goes to about $4.80, that will change. That is when I believe that if that ever happens, then that is when the paradigm will shift. That's when that's when it's probably a good idea to start considering feed costs as an expense. And when feed costs become an expense, the only way that you'll really be able to overcome that situation is by growing grass. I guarantee it, if the price of corn goes up 20%, like if corn goes from 160 to let's say what's 20% of 160? Let's just say it goes from 160 to what's 20% of one? I don't even know. Let's just say it goes to 200, right? Let's say it goes to 200. Corn goes from 160 a ton to 200 a ton. If you got corn that's $200 a ton and you got a feeder cattle animal, the price of a feeder cattle animal has fallen from $1,900 to $1,600. That's when the paradigm is. That's when I think that the shift will happen. When it's like you should actually start considering your feed expense as an expense. It's no longer really a profitable investment, because I've talked about the idea of feed for me right now is that I can put money into my cattle feed, and when utilized properly, the cattle feed will actually make me money. And so it's not an expense right now. It's a store of wealth, and it's going up in value when I feed it to the cattle, right? But when that dynamic changes, when it turns into a situation where the feed is actually making me lose money, like when I feed my cattle, I actually end up losing money, then feed is no longer a store of wealth. It's no longer a store of capital. It's no longer an appreciating asset. At that point, it's become an expense. And when that happens, the solution to that problem is to grow grass. But you're not just going to be able to put cattle on any type of grass, right? Growing grass, it's a lot harder than it looks. Most people cannot grow grass to a level where they can run 5, 6, 7, 8 calves per acre. Most people can't. I don't really know anybody that can do that. I'm pretty much the only. I'm not saying this to fiddle my own diddly. I'm just saying I don't know anybody else that can do it other than me. Right? Because to have cattle on grass all the time, be growing the grass and be running the cattle on it at the same time, it takes a very high level of skill. Right? If your grass comes in too hot, your animals are going to get acidosis. They could bloat to death. If you got little calves and they're having acidosis, if you're bringing home 200-pound calves and you're putting them out on real fresh grass and they get acidosis, they'll dehydrate, they'll get sick, they'll stop eating, they'll die, etc., etc. Even your bigger animals will have acidosis and could potentially bloat to death. And, if you don't fertilize your grass correctly and it stops growing and you have to now utilize the commodity markets entirely to feed your calves, well, then you're losing money, right? You're losing money because in this dynamic, the cattle feed is no longer profitable. You're actually losing money when you feed your animals the grain. Or you're barely making enough money. It's like, why would you even waste your time with this? If you're not going to make, if you're going to make $50 an animal, if you're going to make $100 an animal, you're going to be miserable. You're going to have to run like 1,000 calves a year to make like 60 grand. And so it's like, if that's what you want to do, then knock yourself out, right? And I would not touch that business with a 50,000 foot pole. And so the idea is you have to learn how to grow grass. You have to learn how to grow grass. You have to learn how to understand the feed values of the grass as well. When you take a look at a field of grass, you should be able to tell, is this grass accumulating biomass at a good rate, right? Is this field accumulating biomass at a good level of accumulation? What are the weather conditions for the next 2 weeks? What can I do? What do I see the mineral concentrations of my field? Do I see any deficiencies in my field? What do I see my field? What am I going to be doing with my field in 3 months? You have to consider all of these things. And if you ever mess up, you will be in a situation where your grass will stop growing. And if your grass stops growing and you have to utilize the commodity markets to take care of your animals, to feed your animals properly and keep them gaining properly, and the dynamic has shifted to where you're actually losing money on the grain, then you will be miserable. You would have been better off just getting a job or doing something else, like buying rental property or whatever else it may be, something else that's just going to make you more money. And so the big idea is you got to learn how to grow grass, and you got to learn how to grow grass to a very high level. If you're not able to even run 3 or 4 calves per acre, you're going to have a miserable time in the cattle business. I can almost guarantee it. If you cannot grow grass at a level where you could maintain 3 to 4 calves per acre with reasonable weather conditions, you will be miserable in the cattle business. I would be willing to bet money. You're just not really going to make any money. You would have been better off just doing something else. And growing grass, running cattle on grass is not easy. It's much harder than it looks. If you're watching me do it, it's going to seem like but you got to be very careful about that. If you're sitting there and you have zero knowledge and experience, if you have not ever grown grass ever, and you think that you can grow grass like me tomorrow, you are incorrect. You are throwing yourself off a cliff. I would be willing to bet money. I've talked about this, right? you did not find a shortcut. If you think you found a shortcut, you did not find a shortcut, right? You're throwing yourself off a cliff. You're going to lose everything. It's not going to work for you. I guarantee it. I would be willing to bet money. And I've already talked about this, but the big idea is to learn how to grow the grass first. Because if you learn how to grow the grass first, even if you mess up 10 times over the next 3 years, if you want to plant 10 acres of grass and fertilize it, it'll cost about $750. If you messed up 10 times over the next 3 years, it would still only have cost you $2,500 a year. And chances are, if you're watching me do it to a reasonable degree, there is zero reason why anybody should just flat out fail. Right? Like, if you have watched me grow grass, I've done it like 15 times, right? I've planted grass like 10 times, right? And grown it like 10 times. If you've watched me grow grass, there is zero reason why you should fail repeatedly. You might fail one time out of your next 3 times. You might fail one time out of your next 5 times, but you should not be failing. You should not. If that is what is happening, you need to sit down and think about what you're doing. All right? Are you actually doing what is, are you actually doing what you should be doing? Plowing the field, utilizing positively charged fertilizers and plowing them into the field. When you utilize positively charged fertilizers, are you plowing them into your field? Are you drilling your grass at the right depth? Whatever it may be, right? Are you utilizing the weather conditions properly? Is it 85 degrees outside right now or cooler, 75 to 85 degrees in the afternoon? Do you have some soil moisture? Are you actually doing the steps correctly? Because if you are doing the steps correctly, you should not fail repeatedly. You should not be failing 5 out of 5 times. If you fail 1 out of 5 times, that's completely normal. That even happens to me. But it does not matter, right? Maybe one time whatever, right? I plant my grass, whatever, right? Plant my grass and whatever, it doesn't grow, and 2 months later I replant it, and 2 months later when I replant it, I do just fine, right? That's how it should turn out. But you should not be failing. You should not be repeatedly failing. Okay, you should not be repeatedly failing. If you fail 1 out of 5 times, that's completely normal. Sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it says it's going to rain and it doesn't rain, right? Something like that happens, right? And if something like that happens, that's completely normal. It said it was going to rain, it didn't rain. It did rain, but it rained 5 minutes away, whatever, right? Sometimes things like that happen. But you should not be failing 10 times in a row. You should not be failing 5 times in a row. And if you even marginally succeed, you can put the cattle, you can go and get yourself 5 or 10 cattle, have them eat the grass, and once they've eaten the grass, you can sell the cattle and make all your money back. You can make your $750 back. You can make your $1,200 back. And so, that's the big idea. Make money as you go. And then as you make that money, you can reinvest those earnings into building your skill set. And I can almost guarantee that if you think that you found, I would be willing to bet with everybody that if you think for whatever reason that you can skip the work, you think that you can skip the effort that it took to learn how to grow the grass and run the cattle on the grass properly. If you think that you can just wake up tomorrow, if you think that you can wake up in 5 years and just do this, you're wrong. You're throwing yourself off a cliff. You're not going to make it. You will lose all your money. You will lose all your money. You're not going to be able to, and I would be willing to bet money. You're throwing yourself off a cliff. I would bet money. And so right now, I've decided that that's what's going to happen, is that I am going to, and if you don't believe me, like if you're like, oh my God, what a prick, I can do this, and you think that you can go do it, then go ahead and do it. Knock yourself out. Have fun, right? Have fun. Go and have your little La La Land adventure. If it's a free country. You can do whatever you want. But you're gonna lose all your money. I would be willing to bet. And so right now, what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna take my loan early. Within 2 weeks, I will have paid off another $5,000 to $6,000 worth of debt. Within about 3 months and 3 weeks, my debt will be essentially negligible. I will have 40 cattle, and I will have like 30,000 or something in debt. It will be negligible. The debt that I have will be negligible, and when the debt that I have is negligible, I can essentially just start reinvesting all of my earnings into building my investment portfolio. I don't have to worry about paying down debt. Well, I'm going to pay off all of my debt, but the debt essentially becomes negligible, because by the time that I have $30,000 worth of debt and 40 cattle, I could essentially pay off my debt at any time. And so I could liquidate a portion of my assets. I could increase the value of my assets by increasing the average weight of my herd. I can do all sorts of things. And so now that I see what's happening, I see what's going to happen, I'm going to take my loan early. And I am going to start reinvesting. Once I get my new property squared away, I'm going to start reinvesting my earnings. And when I take a look at what I'm doing right now, that essentially means that I'm going to be growing the size of my herd by about 30% every single month. About 30% every single month. Or every 2 weeks, excuse me. So, or not every, I will be growing the size of my herd very quickly. The whole idea of compounding interest of compounding growth, etc., is very, it's a lot of numbers. And so if I increase the average weight of my herd from, let's say that right now, when I sell my animals at 550 pounds, I am making an average return of 30% on my money. But when I get into the backgrounding business and I take the average weight of my herd from 450 to 850, I will be increasing my earnings to like 70%. Raising the animal from 550 to 850 on straight grass, it's practically free. I mean, it's going to cost me like $45. And if I raise the animal from 550 to 850, I've increased the value of the animal by like $400 or $500. And so when I start reinvesting my earnings, my herd will grow very quickly. I will have a large amount of equity stored into the value of my cattle. And when I have that, I can essentially just, whenever I need money, I can just liquidate my assets. Anytime that I need money, I won't even need cash. I don't even need cash. If I ever need cash, I could just liquidate a portion of my assets. And then I'm good to go. Just like the system or the situation that I'm in right now, I have $5,000 worth of cash, and it's all the money that I could possibly ever need. I don't need more than $5,000. There's nothing that I could possibly do with $5,000 short of having major problems. Like if I decided that I wanted to go and do drugs, sure, I could use $5,000, right? If I wanted to go and buy myself a super nice car for whatever reason, sure, I could use $5,000. If I wanted to go and drink a bunch of alcohol or go, to a bunch of restaurants and just be an idiot, then sure, I could use $5,000. If I wanted to go to the casino, sure, I could use $5,000, right? But short of being an idiot, there's nothing that I could possibly do with $5,000. $5,000 is enough money for me to do whatever I want. I'm essentially in a situation right now where it's like, there's nothing that I could possibly do with the money. And if I did have an emergency situation where I desperately needed money, I could just liquidate more animals, and if I liquidated more animals, I would just have more money. So that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.